Welcome to the Martinez Cosmology podcast, our podcast for reflections and talks on various aspects in life, seen from the perspective of the Danish writer Martinez and his works and spiritual analyses. My name is Pernilla Rosell, and I'm very happy to welcome two friends today to our episode, and that is Anne Kulper and Anne Puller. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we are three women today, sitting here in Stockholm and Sweden, and we will talk a little about a very personal topic, which is our relationship to God and how that has developed in our own lives. And we will relate that to Martinez's cosmology, of course. I could begin by saying that we are recording this on the 29th of May, 2020, in the middle of a worldwide corona pandemic. As everybody knows, if you're listening to this right now or just a few days from today. So in a way, we are living in times of great uncertainty. It could be on a personal level and worldwide. I mean, everybody knows this has changed the world a lot. Many people are afraid of what's going to happen, how long this is going to last. You might be influenced in your daily lives and so on. And we are all working with courses at the Martinez Center in Klint in Denmark. And right now we are wondering if we will be able to go to Denmark at all, if the borders will be open and so on. So it is a special time. It's great to be here. We're actually sitting in the beautiful home of Anne Kulper at a distance from each other, as recommended, as at least physically distant. But we thought that it's actually a great time to reflect on those very personal questions. And many people do that today, I think. I mean, what's the meaning of this? What's happening in the world right now? What kind of spiritual basis, what kind of ground do I have within myself that could support us in those times and in all the difficulties we have in our daily lives? So if we could just start with this question, because it's a very personal and almost intimate question, I think. Our image and experience of God. Anne, and it's difficult now because I'm talking to two Annes, but Anne Puller, if you would like to start, how has this image developed through your life?
Well, I can say that my relationship to God, it occupies me a lot and has done for a long time. So I grew up without much other than evening prayer, and my parents were not typically religious, but not typically atheist either. But I sang in a cathedral choir and had my kind of spiritual experience, or experience that there is something greater than us and than me. When I was 10 years old, singing St. Matthew's Passion for the first time. And I still remember that feeling, and it makes my hairs, how do you say? I can, it's a physical sensation of something very great and wonderful. So I had a kind of relationship to God then. I didn't like the church way of that you have to, in Swedish you say böja ditt hjärta, that we are sinful and need to go down on our knees for God. I didn't like that, so I used to look up into the vaults of the church and sort of say, "Hello, God." But then I became atheist because I thought the world seemed to be going haywire. Also then, I mean, this was in the 70s, late 60s and 70s. And I was if there is a God, I was sort of angry with God because there was so much war and as a teenager, in my late teens, after school, I worked in a hospital where people either died or went to mental hospitals. And I had nightmares and I was angry and depressed. Can one be angry and depressed? So it was some kind of combination of that. And I thought, if you exist, God, why are you not doing anything about this? We're all going, I thought things were going the wrong way and nobody was doing anything about it. So that was my atheist period. And then I studied biology. I studied philosophy and didn't really find answers. And then I studied biology and actually got another feeling of there must be something greater over the microscope, because I saw such beauty and such ingenious constructions in these flowers and organs and how the cell works, and I thought, it cannot be coincidence. It's crazy. It must be something higher.
Yeah, I also grew up in a home where my parents were not religious and we didn't pray. I'd never heard about praying when I was a child, but I remember I liked very much the stories about Jesus' life and when I went to Sunday school, but nobody was really, God was maybe this old man sitting on a cloud, but it wasn't really, I didn't have a relationship to that. It was really the way Jesus was living and all the stories that were interesting for me. And when I became a bit older, I think because my parents were both into physics and biology and not really spiritually interested, and I was also thinking about who am I really, and when you really go deep inside and ask yourself, maybe I'm just a result of the egg and the sperm, and I'm really nothing else than that. It was really depressing. I remember when I was thinking about this, maybe I was 14 or so. But after that, I don't know, I didn't know what I was looking for, but I was looking for something else. I started to, maybe not until I came into the higher school, but philosophy, and I started to read Indian philosophy and then also more religious books, and I was looking everywhere really for something that felt more that the whole life, the whole mystery of life in a way could be explained. And I went to many books, actually, when I studied at the university, sociology, which was interesting for me, but I preferred, when I went to the library, I always went to the religious shelf, and I think this was very important for me at that time, all these old mystics in the 12th and 13th century, Mester Eckhart, I don't know how it's called in English, but and others of these, and their experiences, and I don't know why. I can't remember that I had any experiences like that then, but yeah, it was a way of looking for things. And I also did go over to Zen Buddhism when I was maybe 25, when I came to New York to study dance there. Everybody was doing Zen Buddhism at that time and started to meditate, and yeah, it was like looking for something, and now I know what I was looking for, but I didn't know it then. So it's nice that I have, that at least I know now what it is that I was searching for. So how was it for you then, Pernilla?
Yeah, I'm thinking, and I think it's so interesting. I just listened to a radio program in Swedish that's called People and Belief, Människor och tro, a few days ago, and realize how difficult it is for many people to talk about God and religion and spiritual matters today in Sweden. And I certainly work today mostly in an academic setting where people very, very rarely talk about spiritual experiences. And still, when I was thinking of this podcast and this morning, actually remember that, well, I know that we always had evening prayers when I grew up. So it's very personal and individual. And as a child, I never reflected on the fact that that was something we did in our family. Both my parents were used to evening prayers. I like that. I remember a brother-in-law of mine just commented on it, and you even had your evening prayers. And I thought, that's right. And that was very different for other people, but as a child, you don't reflect so much on what it's like for other children. So I grew up with evening prayers. I also grew up with a father who was interested and a grandmother who was interested in Martinez and other spiritual works, which of course influenced me as well, in the sense that I grew up in secularized Sweden, but in a more or less traditional Christian setting. I also went to Sunday school. I also loved to read the stories about the Bible. I had sort of a children's Bible. I read it from the beginning to the end, from the beginning to the end, and from the beginning to the end. But to say that you developed your relationship to God in that sense, I think it's almost as difficult to describe that as it is to understand your own individual path in life, in a way. It doesn't mean that I had a stable relationship to God when I grew up or later on. Certainly not, especially not when I was a little bit older and I went into academic life and wrote a doctoral dissertation. That was perhaps the time where I felt most distant to that kind of feeling. But I certainly had that kind of framework. I've never been an atheist, I don't think so. Which means that it's quite difficult for different people to talk about this because it's so personal, I think. But it seems that we have all three very individual paths, but it has deepened with time, I think. So since this is a Martinez podcast, I mentioned that I came into contact with it as a child, of course, adapted to a child's level. So I certainly grew up with the idea of a very loving God, as a contrast to your picture of God, Anne. And when did you find... When did you find the loving God?
Yeah, well, I did. During the same period as I was studying biology, I tried theosophy and Steiner a little bit earlier, but it didn't quite sort of click for me. But then I was studying biology in Uppsala, and for some reason I found an advert where it said that Sigge Westerlund, who is one of the pioneers for Martinez cosmology in Sweden, was giving an introductory lecture. So I went to Stockholm and sat there wondering, what is this? I was rather skeptical, and I thought it would be somebody who sort of was a bit of a patriarch, so sort of telling this is how things are, but he was not at all. He was a bit rather sort of timid, but very kind and sweet. And he gave this lecture with slides, and I sat there and I realized sort of halfway through the lecture, gosh, here's the answer. And it was it explained the meaning of darkness, the meaning of suffering. And I just sort of swallowed it and felt blessed, and after the lecture I couldn't get out of my chair, and so I sat there actually crying out of relief, I think. And he came and sat beside me, and after that I started studying, and it took a while, I remember, before I sort of thought, well, what am I going to do with all this anger? I can't be angry anymore, but I had it as a habit to be angry with things in society and so on. And now that I had understood that things are the way they should be and they cannot be better right now, and there's a meaning with the difficulties, and we are on our way towards heaven on earth. So I took in that, but I mean, then it's taken decades I took it in on some level, but then, a lot of work, inner and outer work followed.
How old were you when you?
24 or 20, 23 or 24.
It's of course very interesting to note, since we relate this to Martinez's works, that he states that we repeat earlier lives up to the age of 30, actually. So those different phases, of course, follow each other, and you can see that certain events are very important, that they might have been very important events in earlier lives too. And then, of course, they are mirrored in this life. Did you also have a sort of specific event?
Well, I went a very long way until I found Martinez, and now I feel really happy about this, because I was really into Buddhism, and then it was Taoism, and then Sufism, and then Kabbalah, and then all these mystics, and Taoism was I was really deep into it, because it's in a way very similar to Martinez, the way you look at life, and they never talk about God. The word God, I guess, isn't there, but actually Tao, I guess, is the same. But it's more this, it got really deep into my heart that everything, life is changing all the time. It goes up and it goes down, and then this happens and this happens, and we get more and more in harmony with life. And this was my big... how I experienced getting into life somehow. And for me, I don't talk so much about God either. I feel more like it's to be in connection with life. I guess it's another way to say that you have this connection with God. And it felt really good. And I read all these books, when you go to a spiritual bookshop, also in New York, they had all these different books. And when I came back to Sweden, I had read almost everything, also Steiner and Theosophy and so on. And then there were only these white books left at Vattuman in the bookshop here in Stockholm. Well, maybe I should try one of those white books also, I said. So I bought the first Livets book. And when I started to read it, one of the first chapters, I guess I was maybe 38, 39 at this time. In the beginning, there is something, if you find a book where you feel that you get this inspiration in your heart, in your life force somehow, then you know that you are at the right well to feel connected to life. And this was really a strong experience for me. So then I bought all the other books also, and I read and read and read. And after a year, I had read all the 7 books, which is quite a lot to take in. But I know that I didn't take in everything at once. But at least I felt now, when I have read all these 7 books, I have to start from the beginning to really understand what it's all about. So for me, it was a long history until I found to this, where I now feel very much at home, even if I also I'm very inspired by the mystics. I think this is also why it's interesting for me to talk about this, how we really experience God in ourselves. This, I think, and it's not so easy to talk about, but it's also in a way impossible to talk about, but at the same time it's a longing to share it with other people, even if everybody has their own way. I always get very warm in my heart when we come to these topics. So I think it's something that maybe we can learn to talk more about it also with other people.
What I was thinking before, that it seems that at least in our part of the world where we are used to using our intellect, it is as if the language of talking about God or the divine has become more sort of academic or distant or difficult to really catch what it's really about. You could define it, you could describe what's the concept of God, but that's not the same as actually experiencing closeness to God. And that's of course what the mystics that you're talking about try to describe I've actually also been fascinated by all the Christian mystics. I don't know so many of them, but they always try to describe that experience. And of course, Martinus himself describes in detail, in a very, very moving way, his own initiation and his contact with God. That has inspired me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also am very moved every time I come to that kind of passage, either in these articles or books. Yeah, it's something so important and for me, and so it's somehow it puts the rest of life into place somehow. For things fall into place, even to some degree, depending on the situation, even the painful things, they sort of, all right, that's how things are, and they just are.
Do you have some kind of sort of daily moments when you try to focus on your own really intimate connection to God?
Yeah, I've had it for such a long time, so it's really the best time of the day. Every morning I sit for 20 minutes and just very quiet, and almost every time it's like getting more and more deep inside of you, and almost every time, not always, because sometimes the things are going on in your head, and I can really have this. It's very warm feeling in the body, and maybe tears in my eyes, and 20 minutes is actually enough. It would maybe be too much if I were in that state of being too long, but it feels like such a good way to start the day for me.
Yeah, I also have a similar routine. It sounds like I haven't had it always, but I've always been. I think it's due to the fact that I came into this life as rather insecure and with a lot of fears and anxiety, and with a good talent to imagine disasters. And so life has sort of forced me to sit down and quiet and so I've used various methods during most of my grown-up life, practicing relaxation and mental training, and they've always been with some kind of direction to, or directing myself to God or the Godhead. And now, the last few years, I've been doing it regularly every morning. And I find it's also, I can recognize your description, Anne, of how just when I manage to quieten my thoughts, which I don't always, it's as if my, it's both this mental, emotional, and physical feeling or sensation, and as if my cells and organs say, "Oh, the sun is coming out," and I also feel held somehow, that there is an embraced by life. Yeah, and it's nice when it comes, but if I try, it doesn't come. If I try in the wrong way, it then it's sort of and it's as if something shuts above my head, shuts down.
You can recognize that if you have the effort or the expectation that I want to have a certain kind of experience, or I would like to have an answer. Is that you put sort of a filter perhaps between you and what you want? Because I remember when you listen to Martinus's own lectures, he sometimes also tells that people come to him and tell him they find it difficult to pray because no one is answering, or who are you going to talk to? And he just tells them, well, you can just talk, just pray, but pray just in your normal words, in whatever form you would like to do it. But of course, I think that illustrates that many people feel like they're talking into thin air, and even if we have even if we do think I do have a relationship to the divine, it might be that all those expectations and hopes and fears just at least to me, that I find it difficult just to have peace. I think you, Anne, are so used to meditation through all your different, you have so much knowledge about the Eastern tradition of finding peace and balance. But I think many of us are still into this mental states where, at least where I really need to learn how to be quiet and listen and to sort of stop my own thoughts. So sometimes I manage, sometimes I don't. During these Corona days, I find it every day more and more wonderful just to walk in nature and to just be aware of all the nature, that you find God in every aspect of nature.
I think nature for both of us is also, all the three of us, is really important. But I guess for me, it's also, I've been as a dancer and choreographer all my life, and I did also start very early with Tai Chi and Qigong, and that has also been like maybe what you would call prayer, but I never thought about it like this. But it's like really being inside, and I think the kingdom of heaven is inside you, I think it says in the Bible. I think I found it a long time ago, and it's a very peaceful and still place where I can I can just in a second be there somehow, and I can also go out of it again, but it's always there somehow, which feels like a really wonderful experience and a wonderful habit. Maybe it has become also. It makes life so much easier. It's like I was looking for the word lönnkammare in Swedish, and it's called sacred chamber in English when it's translated.
Secret chamber.
A secret chamber.
Could be sacred.
Sacred also, maybe sacred.
Sacred chamber.
Because in the Bible it doesn't say lönnkammare, it doesn't say secret really or sacred, it just says a chamber, the word. So I don't know if it's Martinez who has... But it's really, it feels like it's something you always have with you. You don't have to have it from outside, or even if you are in nature, the nature is in a way also inside of us. I guess it's this feeling that the mystics also talk about, being one with everything. It comes in short glimpses, but maybe it can come more and more. And be more and more a part of us, like it was for Martinez, I guess. He was always praying, he said, which I thought was really mysterious in a way. Is he always sitting like this? But for him, I guess it is feeling God with him all the time, and that's to be always connected.
Martinez also says, at least one lecture, probably more than once, that he really experiences God in everything and everyone. So he says that all the people, all those who are sitting in front of him, and you can really feel it when he says it. I see God in you all the time. You feel extremely included, I think, when he says that, even if I'm listening a long time later. You can really feel that that's not just a description and analysis. That's how he experiences life. I think it's very, very inspiring, because I think many people today who might have difficult to relate to God in the secret or sacred chamber might find it easier to relate to the idea of God in all beings that you encounter, that you actually can sort of greet God in everyone. I mean, I feel quite moved when I think about it now, because it means that those two, my dear friends, are part of God, and I'm privileged to be here to just have this conversation and all the beautiful things I see around me. But of course, he could feel that all the time. He also lived in a time where they had concentration camps and where Denmark was occupied and so on. And he still always had this secure feeling of everything around him was God, and everything that happened was in the way Providence had decided. He had this complete trust. He had, of course, a talent completely developed to feel this complete connection to God and a complete trust all the time. And that in those uncertain times might be what I've barely started developing that talent. Not just to think that it's intellectually a logical idea, but to really experience trust.
He describes it as developing a spiritual organ in order to be able to perceive and there's one little sentence in that article that is called The True Relationship to God 2, The Secret Chamber, in its English translation, where I think I've got it here. Yeah, he writes it like this, that in reality the relationship is such, the relationship to God, that we should rather reach a state where we completely consciously talk to the Master of the universe and understand that all our fellow beings are a kind of living answers from the Godhead. To understand these answers correctly is a pleasure to which there is no parallel whatsoever. When I read that the first time, it made a very deep impression on me, and it still does, to try and have this dialogue where I maybe ask for courage, or I ask for some kind of clarity, making a decision, or shall I get involved here, or shall I back off, and all kinds of things every day. And knowing that and trying to, or practicing to see how does God show me the way, and through other people, or through a telephone call, or something that happens to somebody else, or and then to try to interpret these in the so-called correct way. I guess it's more a guessing from my side. And I've also noticed that the times when I'm most unhappy is when I feel as if I don't understand anything. What does God mean with this? What am I supposed to learn? What on earth is this? I sort of feel this is too difficult. You've overestimated my capacity, God.
I don't want this lesson.
That could be probably what I say. I don't want this. It's too painful or too difficult. And then I sort of try to find my way. And I remember many times thinking, well, I don't know now, but maybe I can learn. Maybe you can teach me, show me the way. And can't say it's a straightforward way, but bit by bit, day after day, things sort of, and looking in retrospect, I can see that certain things that if I hadn't had this world picture with me, I would probably have backed off. I said, no, I'm not doing this. But thanks to this world picture, I've sort of gone into it, chosen to do it, even if I knew it would not be easy. And I can sort of look back 10 years later and see, gosh, what I learned. Gosh, what a fantastic relationship this person, whoever it might be, and I have built up during these, going through all these difficulties. And I can feel extremely grateful.
So it's always also a question of perspective. I mean, we are all also teachers in different areas, and we know that a process of learning can be very difficult during learning, and it's only afterwards, or it's always a process when you see the whole picture. So, But it seems as if it has helped you, at least to have the idea of the whole picture, that there is a whole picture, gives us support during those painful moments, even if it perhaps doesn't take away all the pain, I guess.
No,
but
but
it can support
knowing
us. Yeah.
or knowing, I believe that I know, if you can say that. Somehow, for me, I mean, it might sound a bit arrogant to say that I know, but I do. For me, this world picture makes life reasonable. It makes it even if it would be a hypothesis, I like it. Come and say that. and even if I don't feel that in different situations, knowing that, well, I think God is right, life is right when it comes to it, is very helpful.
I mean, I think what works. Something you feel as a teacher too, it doesn't really matter as long as it works. So, in that sense, do you feel the same, Anna, or?
Well, I guess my life has been so different from yours. I've understood that also. But it was interesting now when you had this hand. Oh God, it's like there. And for me, I always go in. So I thought about how different ways I always go in, and then I know. I hear, but it's not. Well, sometimes it is actually words.
And it's pointing to her heart.
To her
heart. With very beautiful moments, you're a dancer.
Because this is really where it all is somehow. And for me, it's not a hypothesis. It's really something that is there. And I guess that's why it feels so peaceful also. I have no doubts that it's not. I mean, it can't be in another way than how it is in a way. So it's interesting how for me it's more and more now that I'm so grateful for all these things that come. It feels like from inside, but I know it's from life somehow. And even when I plan a lecture, this is what I usually do now in the mornings, because I guess we are going to Denmark this summer. We hope so, and then it feels like I get so much help from inside somehow. It's such a great feeling, and it's such a blessing. Maybe I never use that word really, but such a luxury to have this connection somehow. And of course, it also sometimes it's gone when it's a little bit too much going on outside. But usually, I have this very strong. There is a plan, and when I think that, I just know the plan is good. Maybe that's the same that you say also.
I don't. Yeah. It's not really a hypothesis for me.
No, I think also.
I just felt a bit arrogant saying that.
No, I don't think.
I do also know.
Yeah. And I think this is when the cosmology is really what Martinus tells us, that we can't know in another way than he says these things, but we can have it inside our heart, and then we know it is like this.
Yeah.
And it's very comforting somehow to have it inside like that. And I think also he says in these articles, even if we know all the laws and the principles and so on, if we don't have them here, it's not really much use for us in our life. This is a process I think we are working on now more and more, to have it inside. And then it becomes, in a way, very simple, everything. In the beginning it felt like so much different things, but then things come together and they're the same word for... You can have many words for the same thing. God and love. And
life.
Yeah.
I certainly feel, and I think the way I interpret what you are saying, that this is a part of your life, of my life, that becomes more and more central every day, at least. I mean, we are all not 20 any longer. So we have experienced different crises, obviously. We do, in the school of life. As we try to interpret the direct speech, it could sometimes be very direct and sometimes be very pleasant. But I feel when I listen to you that I think all of us experience that it is so central to our lives and becomes even more central to try to develop this connection. Or even if you have it all the time, but as you do, but would you agree that it becomes more and more central?
Yeah, definitely.
It grows.
Yeah, and it does really grow all the time. I think it's a long process, because he says also that we have to develop the organs to be able to more and more have this connection, I guess. But it's a good start to feel this little connection, the thread somehow into your heart.
Very inspiring, actually, and so many different things that we could focus on. Time flies. We should wrap it up, this talk. I very much like what you said also, that it's interesting to share those things, even if it's very intimate and personal. It could be also very rewarding to listen to how did you experience, or how do you experience God and prayer and those things. There's just one aspect I was curious about. It might be, I hope it's not too sort of contemporary and academic, but some people do have a problem because the very concept of God could seem somewhat male, like an old man. And I mean, Martinus very often describes and Jesus Christ describes his relationship to his father. And I think it's wonderful, and I relate to that. And I don't think I've ever had a problem with that, but sometimes I try to feel like just father, mother. I mean, it's beyond all gender descriptions, obviously, the divine. But I think that for some people that could be a hindrance, something that stops them. Because we are 3 women now reflecting on this, I was curious. Have you ever thought about that, about the problem of relating to God as sort of a male figure?
I have thought about it, but it's actually never been a problem for me. And sometimes I wonder, is there something wrong with me that makes that it's not a problem? Am I unaware of something there? But I work with translation into English, even though I'm only half English, and I would like to write humankind instead of mankind.
Yeah.
But so far it's sort of the tradition in the translation of Martinus that we use mankind. But it would be nice to use humankind instead. But I haven't got much experience of those difficulties. No. Do you?
No, I never. I always find it strange when somebody says Father, Mother, God.
Yeah.
Because for me it's beyond. Yeah. It is really beyond, and also I know when I started to think about, I hear this voice sometimes, and it's not a male voice and it's not a female voice. It's just a voice, and it feels really good for me to not think about that it's father or mother. It feels strange. Father is also a strange word for me to use. I guess I can say God. I actually do a lot without thinking about that. I do use the word God. It's like an expression you use sometimes, but life feels more to me, and life is not female or male. It's life is life somehow. It feels good for me.
But could you just, you do hear this voice sometimes. What does it say? What does it say?
Yeah, sometimes it's really very clear. Like when there's something I don't know what to do, it can just and sometimes I also think, is it me saying this or who is saying this actually? But I've had a very strong experience once. I've actually talked about it before, but I can tell it again. I walked down the street here, and something had happened that made me so happy. And walking down the street, I said, "Oh, thank you so much from the depth of my heart. I thank you so much for this." And I remember exactly also beside the tree there where this happened. And suddenly I heard this like a whisper, "But that's where I am."
Oh.
And for me, it was really very quiet, and it was like a cut in time somehow. Is God thanking Himself through me in my heart somehow? And this was like a whisper, very strong somehow, even if it was quiet, but a strong. So I guess these experiences make the heart feel, wow, God is in there. Yeah, that's nice.
Beautiful. Do you think then that we ought to talk more about God? And do you think that women perhaps talk about God in a different way than men? I know you can't generalize, obviously. We are individuals, and Martinus tells us that we are developing through the pole transformation and so on. So we are not really men and women anymore, but we do have a past in either of the gender categories. Do you think that? Have you experienced that women perhaps express this or talk about this in a slightly different way than men? And you're nodding.
Yeah, well, what I can say that I've had more of that kind of, I wouldn't call it conversation because it's dialogue or talks, deep talks about how these things feel inside or what's going on inside with women than with men. But that's about all I can say. I related to the thinking that normally, or it is for that women have been through the centuries more used to using feeling and picking up other feelings because we've been more in situations where we've been taking care of people. Yeah. Family, children, older people, sick people, while men have been building bridges and fighting wars.
Getting food.
Yes, exactly. Bringing the wood in. Or maybe we did that, I don't know. But I also have a male friend who's Buddhist, actually. And who's done a lot of inner research. So, yeah, I'm...
Both, perhaps.
Yeah. That's
I'm just
experience.
reflecting on this. It's just... What do you think, Anna?
I think for me it's actually... To talk about these things, it's not so easy with people who don't have this... some kind of experience somehow inside of them. And for me... I have both female and male friends. Well, I'm in some of these mystic groups where we don't talk so much, but sometimes somebody says something about something, and also the way we perceive or think about God, and it doesn't really matter if it's a woman or a man. And there also I feel it's more about life and experience too. Because this, I guess, is a big difference to the old Christian way of talking about God, which most people have left somehow, and then they don't know where can we find God after this. It feels just so. But I think it's something that everybody, sooner or later, you relate to it somehow inside of you, and then you know, and you, yeah. But it has really been really nice to talk to you too.
Yeah. And I think
yeah.
those words that you need to relate it to something inside you might be just the central part of it. We need to, and that's what Martinez describes as well. Of course, when you are at that point, it's when the prodigal son or the prodigal daughter returns.
Yeah.
We need to have a need inside. We need to want to return. And then you find the connection. So I think it's been great talking to you. We could go on, but I hope that we can do that in another episode, perhaps, because it's been very inspiring and rewarding, and I felt we barely started. But it's interesting how intimate and sensitive this topic is, I think, to talk about your own personal relationship to God. But I hope we can also perhaps listen to some listeners' descriptions of how they relate to God. It would be very interesting. Thank you so much, both of you, Ann Pullar, Anne Kulper, for joining us today in the Martinez Cosmology podcast. And that's all from Stockholm for today. Goodbye.